Welcome to Autism ADHD TV. It is the place to be for parents and professionals. I'm your host, Holly Blanc Moses, the mom psychologist who gets it. We dive into all kinds of important information like behavior, social skills, and learning. All right, let's get started. Welcome back to the podcast, Amy Langston.
Thank you for having me back.
I love that you joined us again. You are such a great person to interview, so I'm super excited about that. So I'm going to introduce you really quick. Amy Langston is a native of Raleigh, North Carolina. She is an autistic self-advocate, writer, copy editor, speaker, traveler, and facilitator. She holds a BA from Meredith College and a MA from Hartford Seminary. And Amy, you are a big traveler.
Yep.
Okay. So, when you were talking to me and about the places you've been, I feel very motivated to travel now. All these exciting places. So tell us a little bit about your experience, the places that you've gone to.
Well, I've been traveling my entire life because my parents just love to travel, and they always thought that they wanted to give us that opportunity to see the world. And they just love to be with us. So that's why they always took us with them, almost always took us with them whenever they went anywhere. So very early on, I was traveling around the US. Some big trips that I went on at a young age. We would go to Washington, D.C. We'd go to New York City. We went to the Grand Canyon. We went to Hawaii. We went to London when I was about 4. And then probably the biggest first trip that we took, I was about 11, and we went all across Europe. We went to 7 countries in Europe. And then as I got older, once I was homeschooled as a high school student, that gave us the opportunity to travel whenever we wanted to. So we went to Australia and South America, Antarctica. We went to Europe again a couple more times. We've done some more of the US travel things, Alaska. And then a couple years ago, I went to Japan with my sister. And then I went to a study abroad in Switzerland a couple years ago. After that, I went to the UK with my mom. And then in 2019, I went to South Africa. So that's actually all 7 continents for me. We've traveled through Canada, and I did some travel on my own through New England when I was in grad school there, traveled through North Carolina itself. Now, in last year in 2020, something called COVID happened. You may have heard of it. And
right.
For that reason, I have not really gone much of anywhere since then. But so South Africa was my last big trip that happened in 2019. So
wow.
I
am again amazed. So impressive. And like I said, I want to just, I don't know, go to another town in North Carolina right now or whatever. Just because, again, you're inspiring. So thinking about travel and how this is a really big value for you. I mean, this is really important. And I think that it can be really hard, the idea of traveling with differently wired children, because sometimes it's not the same. And you've been doing this for a long time. So you've been exposed even as a very young person. Do you think that helped you, that exposure?
Yes, I absolutely think it did. I was traveling before I was diagnosed, because I was diagnosed at the age of 10. So I had just been traveling my whole life, and I didn't realize this wasn't what everyone did at that early age, right? Because you don't realize that not every family is like yours. But yes, I think that because I had those experiences with how do you go through the airport and get on a plane, how do you wait in line for things, how do you interact with people from other cultures, How do you research a place before you go visit it? Do trip planning and be in different environments all the time. Because I had that exposure from such a young age, I became used to it. And then travel just became very natural for me. And it became something that I could like claim for myself and do myself and feel comfortable doing it. So because of that, I am so grateful for not just the opportunities to see the world, but what that has done for me in having a sense of confidence and independence.
Yes, so good. So it's summer when this episode's going to air, but of course it is relevant for any time of the year.
Yeah.
That now that people are sort of getting out again and going places, we've been
Yeah.
cooped up for a long time. We're going to see family we haven't seen for a while, so there's more people traveling, and I would imagine much more people traveling now and this coming month than last year at this time. So there are certain things that may come up when, again, you're traveling with a differently wired child. I've heard a lot of my patients have struggled, and whether that's kind of in the car or staying at a hotel or staying at an extended family out of town. There are certain things that come up that we can prepare for and make that more doable and enjoyable for the whole family. So are you ready to jump into some of those things?
Yep.
All right, let's do it. So let's first talk about the car and traveling in the car. It's not always predictable. Traffic happens, delays happen, and a lot of children I work with want to know are we going to get out? When are we going to get there? And this is more than neurotypical people may be asking how much longer, right? So this is something where I'm really need to know how long I'm in here for, and it's not always easy to predict that. And then also there are different things like the environment in the car is not always so easy. I'm worried that I'll get bored. That can be a big thing that comes up a lot. So what are some things that you think are helpful when it comes to traveling in the car?
Well, this is some of my advice. So I think it is important for parents to explain to their child about how long, how far it's going to be, but then to add the caveat that it could take longer. Like it's possible that it will take longer. If you're on the road and you get a sense that it might take a little longer because of traffic or other diversions, tell them that now we know it's probably going to take longer for us to get there. When it comes to keeping your kids entertained in the car, if you have an iPad, there's always iPads seem to be the biggest diversion for kids these days that we did not have when I was a kid. And there's all sorts of travel games you can play. So there's different products that are put out with different travel games. I used to have my eyes glued to the window, and then you keep record of how many of different things you see, like how many gas stations do you see, how many like McDonald's do you see, and things like that. And that can be really entertaining for some kids. So whatever music or games or movies they have that they want to be watching, or if they want to do those roadside games and point things out, it's probably good to have some water and snacks in the car, to have stretch breaks that come at regular intervals. So you stop the car to either get gas or go for a bathroom break, and then they can also get some time to stretch outside of the seatbelts. So
Yeah.
that's one recommendation I'd give.
Definitely. I think that is so important because, you and I were even talking about before we recorded that some children don't have a lot of foods that they eat. And, really important to let them know they have that available if they want it, kind of choices, and where they can stop to maybe get one of those preferred foods on the way. Again, Amy, like you said, back in the day, I mean, I'll be 47, so it's back in the day. We like played with rocks and sticks, right? That was about it. But it was really guessing and not knowing what was coming up. But there's so many things now where we have the iPhone or iPad where we can track how long it is to the next McDonald's if that's what you're going to eat, and giving them a time and really being able to kind of keep updated. And I like that you said, as soon as don't be afraid to say, I think we're going to be longer, because it's better to know then. And of course, that depends individually for that child or not. But like you said, there's so many entertaining things to do, lots of fun travel games. Like, how many license plates from different states can you find, right? Like,
Right.
those are, now we're like going back to the old days there. But there's some really fun things that you can do. And like you said, stretching. I know some of my clients like to have, maybe their favorite blanket with them, or stuffed animal, or if there is sun coming in that's too much, having one of those shades up on the window can be helpful too. So just really thinking about what kind of environment that you're working with. How does that work for your child specifically? And then, even have maybe, I say old time, it makes me sound so old, but really having like a real map, even, that you mark, like a real actual map that you touch. Crazy, right?
What are those?
What are those? Can you even get those anymore? But if you get one, and they can really, that can be a kind of a teaching tool as well, which is kind of neat, is that like showing what your travel is, and what's nearby, and all those kinds of things. So there's really neat things you can do. And Amy, I'm not sure what your thoughts are about this, but if a parent is very concerned or feeling anxious, maybe starting out with just something small. Maybe we're just going to start out 20 minutes and go, get something fun and come back. I mean, really, it doesn't have to be, a giant trip.
Yeah, you don't have to start out in the deep end. And I would also like to just reassure parents that I think that most of the trips I've gone on that have been on the road, we've arrived pretty close to time. Like, it's not gone way over time most of the time. So I don't want them to think that it's probably going to be that there most likely is going to be a diversion. Just that there could be, of course. But that happens way more often when you're going on a flight. That I would say about 1 time out of 5, there is a flight delay. And so that is something that you always need to be prepared for if you're going on a plane and you're not used to going on planes. Always be prepared for a flight delay. It's very common.
Yes, and I'm glad that you brought up flights, because again, another way that people are starting to travel again. And there are a lot of a different environment then. In a car, you have much more control over what's happening kind of inside that small space. But in an airport, there's a lot of people, and there's a lot of noise, and like you said, there are lines and delays, and all these kind of unpredictable things that are coming up. And so, Amy, you're going to know obviously way more about this than me, but I've been aware of, a lot of airports are doing better work. Like, they're saying, okay, let us know what you need when you're going to be here. We can get you through the line more quickly, so you're not having to stay in the line. And not only that, we can provide, possibly a room that has less stimulation going on in it, where you can have some space, and having those places available in the airports, which is pretty new. So really even prepping before you go. And I've had some clients, and I've gone to the airport before too with them, to get them used to that environment and going through and what that would feel like. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, one thing that I've told some autistics about before that they really like the sound of, if this sounds like it would be worth it to people, I'm going to let you in on a secret here. It's called the TSA pre-check program. And I'm a part of it. And what it is, it after you've passed a little clearance, you can do a reduced TSA screening. So you usually have a shorter line. You don't have to take off as much of your clothes. You don't have to take as much out of your bag. And then you can just go on through. It's $85 for 5 years, which if you are on planes as often as I am, that's totally worth it. That's about $17 a year. Some people are like, okay, that's worth it to me to not have to go through regular security. So if that sounds like it would be of interest to autism or ADHD families that start traveling, that's one thing you can do. But usually if you have kids under 12, they're not expected to do as much of that anyway. So that might be something that they kind of get anyway.
That's really good advice.
But so that's one thing when it comes to that part of going through the airport. Once you make it to the plane, flight attendants are usually wonderful. As you're boarding the plane, the flight attendants will be there, and they are very perceptive. And you can, if you can always speak to the flight attendant about what you think your child might need. And especially if you're telling the flight attendant that it is your first flight, they're usually extra attentive and extra understanding. So I would give the flight attendants some credit here when it comes to having your child on their first flight. And speaking for myself, one of my favorite things to have on any flight is an eye mask, because it can get very bright in a plane when you're flying closer to the sun. So I just pull that eye mask over and then lean back in my chair, and then I just let the world pass me by. And that's what I do. And there will always be magazines and things in the front seat that your kids might love looking at. Autistic Little Me did. Autistic Big Me does. And now, of course, if you're going on a really long haul flight, like I have done several of those, I think there's usually much more specific advice you're going to need. And I once wrote this big guide for how to manage long haul flights, which I might post online at some point.
You should definitely. So I love that you were talking about the like mask that you wear to cover up your just the bright light, and how you're figuring out how to make your environment work better for you, right? This environment. I know that, headphones is something that we utilize a lot in my family. My 16-year-old wears headphones a lot of the time. To kind of block out noise and all these kind of extraneous things. So, that, and like you mentioned, the iPad before with traveling, I think is a big one. And then, because there can be a lot of noise. And
yeah, any parent should prepare their child before they go on a flight about ear popping that happens on planes. Should always know that that's something that will happen. Whenever I want to block out noise, I personally prefer earplugs. Okay. And earbuds over headphones. I really don't like headphones, actually. But yes, it's important to be prepared for a lot of the worst, and to know that the worst probably won't happen. So you'll be pleasantly surprised when the worst doesn't happen.
And again, I'm so thankful that airlines are more understanding and are providing more accommodations. And I know they do also have some programs where you can actually go on the plane, and they can, you can experience the noise of the plane and all the things without going anywhere. right?
Yes,
Like,
I did that one time.
oh, you did?
Even though I didn't really need it. I did do that a few years ago just because I wanted to see what that would be like for autistic kids who didn't have as much of that experience. So I decided to do that so that I could expose myself to that.
Wow. Okay. So again, much, much better now than it used to be. And again, like you were saying, lots of, things that we can do on the front end to make those things great. So we talked about traveling in the car, traveling in a plane. Let's talk about the kind of accommodations once you get where you're going. I know some people will go and stay at hotels, some people will go and stay at extended family homes. What are your thoughts about that?
I'm trying to think of what the if a kid is not used to sleeping in something that's their own bed, maybe they'll find that a little difficult. Maybe it would be a good idea to bring their own pillow, but hotel beds are super comfortable. So I'm sure that they'll drop in and go, cool. So I think that the best thing that when it comes to the to new accommodations is to get their kids excited. Like kids, a lot of times, I don't know about all autistic kids, but kids tend to get excited about the idea of going to a new place to stay, like camping out in the backyard or building a fort in the living room, or yay, it's a sleepover. So if you bill it as a sleepover, I think that kids may get a little more excited about the idea of a sleepover in a hotel.
I love that idea. Yeah, because a lot of kids are already talking about sleepovers.
One thing, and as we're talking about easing into it, you could do something like have the family stay in a local hotel to test it out, such that if it really goes bad, you can always go home. That you wouldn't be able to do if you were traveling somewhere else.
Yeah, that makes a lot of
So
sense, testing it out.
the I remember that I don't know if they still do this, but there's a local Embassy Suites hotel in Cary, Raleigh, where kids will have sleepover birthday parties there. So that was for some people their first opportunity staying in a local hotel. So there's and that's what sometimes happens with sleepovers at other kids' houses, is that if you don't feel comfortable sticking around, you can always go home. And that can be your way of testing the waters.
That's really smart. And so thinking about too, would it work if you want to be on the ground level versus taking the elevator? Maybe the elevator's super cool and you want to make sure you get like up at the top. There's so many things you want to think about. And again, we were talking about food and what does that look like? Feeling comfortable with their own things.
You don't usually get to choose where your room is located. So if it's really important for your family, then contact the hotel beforehand so that they're aware of this.
Right. Definitely. Definitely. And then you don't have to be concerned about it when you go. Um, so I think I'm used to doing that because I just call ahead and say, this is what we need. So I'm just already sort of used to calling ahead, but I'm glad that you pointed that out because I do call ahead. So I do think that's important. And then also, what would make it really exciting? Maybe your child really likes swimming. So maybe you choose a pool or choose a hotel that has a pool. Thinking about those kinds of things. What is it going to be like for them? Also, do they need more breaks? Some of the children that I work with, if they're, maybe a family would like to be out and about more, for hours and hours and hours on end, but they think, okay, this is actually a good time where we can actually break this day up a little bit. If their child needs that. If they don't, they don't. But if they do, maybe they need a little bit of a break. Maybe, the room's a little dark, the favorite show's on, and kind of regroup before we go back out there. So just being really flexible, and also letting the child, let me know when you need a break, and we can always go back for a little bit. If it's extended family, I don't know what your thoughts about are with this, Amy, but if it's a place they've been familiar with that house before, but it's not, maybe there's already a pre-plan as far as, okay, if you need a break, it's getting kind of loud out there, everyone's catching up. If you need to kind of get some space, there's space for you to do that.
Yeah.
Just being able to like remind and just say, let me know, let me know what you need. And
yeah, I agree with that. I think that's an important plan, and hopefully the extended family members are also on board with that plan, knowing what the child needs.
I like when you said that, because that's not always the case. We always
not always true,
but right. And then, so again, that goes with food too.
Then why are you even going? You might not want to put that part in, but
don't feel, I guess Amy and I are saying, don't feel obligated to go anywhere where you are not comfortable. How about
or that are not going to be welcome or accommodating. You don't have to go.
We're giving you permission.
We're giving you permission to not go.
To not travel there. I like it. Okay, so I would love for you to mention traveling as an adult. And so I know, and you've been to so many great places.
Mm-hmm.
You told me before that, it's just been such a wonderful experience for you. This is something that you're passionate about. And, I would love for, my 16-year-old to know that that's possible. Like, what does he need to be able to do that later, and all of those things. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Is there something more specific that you want to know? Because there's so many things I could say.
There's so many. I know you've got so much great experience. So what would you tell maybe parents or therapists, educators that are listening, and teenagers, young adults that are listening who are differently wired? There's this whole big world, right? So don't limit yourself. I think sometimes, and I am not differently wired, so I can't speak as someone who is, but what I find from children and young adults that I serve is they feel like they've been told they can't do something, or they've been, oh, that's going to be too hard, or that's going to be, too stressful for you. And sometimes they tend to internalize that and take that as truth.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts about that in relation to travel?
Well, first of all, one of the things that I would like to say to anyone who is diagnosed, or has a loved one who is diagnosed, is that their diagnosis alters their future. It doesn't ruin it. And I really think that autistics can do everything. It just sometimes means taking the scenic route. So it's never too late to try. There's people who did not try things until much later in life. Julia Child didn't publish her first cookbook until she was, I think, 39. Samuel L. Jackson didn't start acting until he was 50 or so. There's people who didn't start becoming known as painters until their late 70s. So it's never too late for anyone to try anything. And the same goes with autistics. There is no one mark on the timeline that if you haven't tried by now, you've gone past the expiration date. There is no expiration date on trying new things. So if others can do it, you can too. So I don't want autistics or autistic family members to think about it in terms of you can't, but to think about it in terms of you can, but it might be a little harder, but you might need to do it differently. So it really is that can-do attitude. Don't think of it as they can't, but as they can. And if you just have that shift in the mindset, then wonderful things can happen. So that's the first thing that I would say with that. And so when it comes to travel, I think the first thing I would say is that if you are an adult and you don't have much travel experience, it's probably a good idea to not travel by yourself, like the first few times that you do it. And a lot of autistics love to make plans. So one of the most fun things that you can do before travel is research the place that you're going. And like they're gonna go crazy when they do that. If there's any place that they see in pictures and that's where I want to go, research that place, find out the things that you can do while you're there, and make a plan. Know that that plan, you may not follow that plan like down to the hour because things happen, things go wrong, but think about the things that you want to do the most and make your plan to do those things. And it's really important to think about things always not going as planned, because even for someone like me, travel is not always fun. I remember when I arrived in Japan and Switzerland and South Africa, and then when I got to those places, one of my thoughts were, why did I come here? Like, why did I do this again? Why did I think this was a good idea? And because I was just unraveling from this. I'm in a new place, and I don't speak the language, and I just it just, and then I know a part of me knows that by the end of it I'll be like, okay, yes, of course this was the best idea. But at first it's like it's going from everything is familiar and comfortable to everything is different and confusing. And I think that would be confusing for a lot of people, but it would also be confusing for me. So just the very fact that I've taken that step is, I think, a sign of bravery and courage. So I think that if you go into it thinking that this is a thing that you can do, not telling yourself that you can't, but that you can, and then finding out where it is you want to go, taking the right person with you when you travel, hopefully by going to the places that you want to see so much, and by having that experience where you see that you can do this, it's going to be so empowering to know that you can get past your challenges, and that autism or whatever it is you have doesn't have to hold you back from anything.
Oh, I love that. There's a quote, Amy, right there. So you were talking about how, being open, being flexible, knowing things may not go exactly as planned, even knowing that at certain points in that travel experience, you might be wondering, why on earth did I do this, like you said?
Yes.
But also being open to all those cool things that you had already learned about and researched and that you're going to do. That's really cool. I love that. And it's great advice, like you said, the first few times that you're traveling, to bring a trusted person with you that you feel comfortable with. And I think that's really smart. And I think that's smart for anybody.
Yeah.
Definitely.
One thing that I want to briefly mention before we close out, because I know you mentioned it at the beginning and before we were talking, and I think it's so important, is food, because how much autistic kids can have very specific diet needs. And there are people who, when they travel, they bring their own food. They either bring non-perishables, or they bring something like MREs. I don't have as much personal experience with that, so I can't say, here's all the things that you need to do if you're going to be bringing your own food. But I see that as an important thing to have as a potential backup. I love that when I travel, I get to try new foods and have those new experiences and push myself a little. But ultimately, it is more important that they eat and then that they eat new food. So have that around as something that they can have if they can't find much foods that that they like. And then, of course, if this is true, if you have allergies and such, you would have to do that anyway. So that's important.
Yes, that is so good. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because I mean, something food like you need, it's going to create definitely some anxiety if you don't have access to what works for you. Right. So good. And Amy, thank you so much. And again, you have, I know, inspired me many, many times. It's just yet another time that you've inspired me. But I'm gonna do a trip.
You should. After this, I can advise you on where to go, because I have some ideas for inspiration.
I love it. Now, I'm not quite as adventurous as you yet, right? There's always the yet.
That's why I'm bearing in mind close places for you to go.
Yes. So I will definitely be asking you about some day trips, overnight trips, all that kind of goodness. So again, thank you so much for coming on again, Amy. I love having you. I know we get such great feedback. Everyone loves your episodes. So they do.
Well, that's good for me to hear. That's good for me to hear.
So I know that our watchers and listeners are going to want to learn more about you and the services that you provide. So how do they do that?
You can go to my website, amylangston.com, where you can read more about me and you can read more about what services I offer. You can email me directly at amy@amylangston.com. And I would be so excited to do business with anyone over things related to autism or related to writings that are not about autism in my copy editing.
I love that. And Amy, I'm going to say this personally, and I hope this is okay with you. If anyone is really enjoying this episode, Amy is an amazing speaker. She's an amazing speaker. And if you are looking for an amazing speaker, I would highly recommend that you contact her. Is that okay, Amy?
Yeah, it is okay with me that people contact me for speaking opportunities. That's my whole thing. Okay. So it's very okay with me.
I love that. And again, thank you so much for coming on. And I'm sure we'll be talking soon.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
Okay. Take care, Amy. Thank you for joining me today. Don't forget to click that subscribe button so you don't miss any future episodes. If you like this episode, please share it with someone. It may just be what they need to watch today. If you're a parent, I'd love if you came on over and joined our Facebook group, Autism ADHD Group for Parents. If you're a therapist or educator, come on over to our group, Autism ADHD Group for Therapists and Educators. You're going to find those links right down there in the notes. Thanks so much, and I can't wait to see you in the next episode.
All content provided is protected under applicable copyright, patent, trademark, and other proprietary rights. All content is provided for informational and educational purposes only. No content is intended to be a substitute for professional medical or psychological diagnosis, advice, or treatment. Information provided does not create an agreement for service between Holly Blanc Moses Crossvine Clinical Group, the interviewee, Holly Blanc Moses LLC, and the recipient. Consult your physician regarding the applicability of any opinions or recommendations with respect to your symptoms or medical condition or the symptoms or medical condition of your family member. Children or adults who show signs of dangerous behavior toward themselves and or others should be placed immediately under the care of a qualified professional.